Hey y'all, welcome to part 10 of Intro to Programming. In today's video, we're going to cover what loops are and specifically look at a for loop. For loops are really good for iterating over things a certain amount of times and doing that code over and over with that loop so we don't have to type out a bunch of redundant code. And they're also very, very good with indexing through arrays. So we went over what arrays were in the last video, so you should be familiar with those. So let's get into it. Now I'm going to type out a quick for loop, and then I will go through each aspect of this. I plus plus CW tab you shall not pass. And okay, so let's look at this. There's three big components of this for loop. So here we have the for, which is going to indicate that it's a for loop, and then parentheses. This is where we have the three different aspects. So we have a variable declaration right here. So int I equals 0. So we're declaring a variable and initializing it to 0. Then we're saying while I is less than 10, go ahead and execute this code down here. After you execute the code, increment the I by 1. This is the same thing as saying I plus 1. So I equals I plus 1. That's the same thing as saying I plus plus, but you're going to see this more often than not. So that's just increment it by 1. So let's run the code, F5. You're going to see I get you shall not pass 10 times on the console. So let's look at what's happening here. So I equals 0. While 0 is less than 10, that's true. Execute the code, increment I by 1. So I is equal to 1. Is 1 less than 10? Yes, true. Print out you shall not pass. Increment I by 1. I is 3. Is 3 less than 10? Yes, print that out. You shall not pass. Increment I by 1 equals 4. Skip all the way to 10 is so it's 9, and then I plus 1 equals 10. Is 10 less than 10? No, 10 is not less than 10. So it stops the for loop and continues executing the rest of the program down here. Let's talk about scoping really quick because we've seen this a few times probably. Now, I have a variable declaration inside of this for loop, and the scope of this variable means the scope is talking about where you can access that variable or where that variable exists. So this variable does not exist outside of this code block. If I were to say I equals 10 down here, that's valid. That's I mean, that's not a good thing to do in this for loop, but I can access that variable down there. If I tried to access it down here, see the IntelliSense isn't even going to pick it up. So if I said I equals 10, I'm going to get an error and it's going to say the name I does not exist in the current context. So that's what variable scoping is. Okay, so that's a simple way we can actually print out you shall not pass to the console. Let's just print out I and see what we get. Oh no, we're going to get an infinite loop because I have that. So get rid of that. So now hit F5 to run. And we're just going to get a counter that counts from 0 through 9. So let's make a function real quick, or a method. And I'm going to make a method that's going to, given a number, I'm going to add up every number up to that number inclusively and then spit out the sum of all those numbers. So if we're given the number 10, I want to add up 1 through 10 and then spit out or return that number at the end. So if you think you can handle that by yourself, stop the video, go ahead and try it, and then come back when you found a solution. If not, I'm going to continue the solution right now. So public static int, because we're returning an int, sum of nums, I'm going to call it, and then given a number, do this. So I'm gonna declare an accumulator variable right here called sum. This is going to be what we're gonna return. So I'm just gonna go ahead and say return sum now. And now let's do a loop. So I equals 0. I is less than or equal to n. I plus plus code block sum equals sum plus I, right? Now we could actually do a shorthand version of this and say sum plus equals I. That is the same thing. These two lines of code are doing the exact same thing. So I'm going to comment this one out. This is more streamlined, looks a little cleaner, so I would recommend using this one, but I'll leave that there for reference. So now if we were to store that result in a variable called result up in the main method, sum of nums, let's pass 10 through there. And then let's console.writeLine this result to the console, and let's see what we get. So 55, yep, that's correct. So now we've made a pretty cool method that adds up the sum of all these numbers. And actually, we can actually say I is equal to 1 because that's just doing another iteration that's pointless. We don't need to add 0 to it. We're just wasting time. So okay, so that's a little method and a good exercise for you. Hopefully you guys were able to achieve that. Now let's look at how we can use a for loop to index through an array. So in the last video we covered an array, and let's make another array very similar to the last video of names again. So here's another way you can declare an array and fill it with names on the declaration. So Frodo, Sam, Mary, Pippin, Aragorn, Gandalf. That's good enough. So semicolon there. This is a way you can actually declare an array and assign values to it in the same at the same process. You can also say new int and then give it in a length right there. That's a little string. That's a little more direct, I would say, a little stricter. It's up to you. You can do either or. It's doing the same thing essentially. So now let's see how we can use a for loop to index through this array. So I'm going to say while I is less than names.length, remember that property from the last video, I++ code block console.writeLine names at I, because this indexing is going to match up perfectly with the index positions in this array. So I equals 0, which is in this position. Frodo, remember 0 is the first element of any array in binary or in this programming language. So, and we're going to go all the way up to names.length, less than names.length, which is going to bring us to Gandalf. So if we go ahead and run that and hit F5, you're going to see we get all the names printed out. So let's see how we can actually throw this into a method as well. And so given an array, print out all the elements in that array. So if you think you can handle that and create your own method, go ahead and do that and pause the video. But if not, I'm going to go ahead and show you the solution now. Public string, actually no, it's going to be public static void, because we're not going to return a string of names. We're just going to print it out at the console, so there's no return type. So public static void print array string array, that's our parameter. And then here we have our for loop, int I equals 0, I is less than array dot length, I++, console.writeLine or CW tab array at I. So now let's get rid of this for loop up here and print array, pass in the names array we just made, and hit F5. Let's see what we get. We're going to get the same thing. So now we can actually use this method on any string array that we create as many times as we want. So that's a cool example of a method and what it can do for you. Let's print them out on the same line here. Plus space, so give it some spacing, take off the line, and it'll give us so we're going to print everything out on the same line. So hit F5. Frodo, Sam, Mary, Pippin, Aragorn, Gandalf. Pretty cool, right? Okay, so that's it for this video. We covered for loops, how to use for loops to index through arrays. In the next video, we're going to cover 2 different kinds of loops, a while loop and a do while loop. So that's going to be a good video. You're going to learn a lot. Thanks for watching this one. I'll see you in the next video.